For over 2,000 years, history has whispered about an emperor whose love affair shocked even the decadent Roman Empire. A ruler who commanded legions, built walls across continents, and redesigned entire cities, yet could not save the one person who mattered most to him. His name was Publius alias Hadrianus, known to history as Emperor Hadrian. And the scandal that consumed his reign began with a beautiful Greek youth whose mysterious death would haunt the ancient world. In October of 130 AD, the most powerful man on earth stood weeping on the banks of the Nile River. According to multiple historical sources, Emperor Hadrian had just lost Antinous, a young man who historians now believe was not merely his companion, but the forbidden love of his life. The official story claimed drowning, but whispers throughout the empire suggested something far darker: suicide, sacrifice, or even murder. If you're fascinated by hidden stories of power, passion, and tragedy that history tried to erase, make sure to subscribe for more forbidden chronicles like this one. What made this tragedy so scandalous was not just that Rome's emperor had fallen in love with another man. According to documented accounts by historians like Cassius Dio and archaeological evidence across the empire, Hadrian's grief was so overwhelming that he did something unprecedented in Roman history. He declared his dead lover a god. Temples were built, cities were founded, and statues were erected across the Mediterranean, all in honor of a commoner who had captured an emperor's heart. This was not simply mourning. Ancient sources describe it as an obsession that bordered on madness. Hadrian commissioned thousands of sculptures of Antinous, more than any other figure in Roman art, except the gods themselves. He established mystery cults, founded the city of Antinopolis, and according to some controversial accounts, may have even consulted oracles and magicians in desperate attempts to communicate with his lost love. The relationship defied every convention of Roman society. While same-sex relationships were tolerated in certain contexts, this was different. Historians suggest that Hadrian's devotion to Antinous went far beyond the accepted norms of Roman culture. The emperor, who had married Sabina for political reasons and maintained the facade of traditional Roman masculinity, allowed his true desires to reshape the empire itself. Ancient writers recorded that senators whispered in the forum, questioning whether their emperor had lost his mind. Some sources suggest that even Hadrian's closest advisors feared his unpredictable behavior when it came to matters concerning the beautiful youth from Bithynia. The empire that had conquered most of the known world now watched its leader become vulnerable in ways that terrified them. But what drove the master of the ancient world to such extremes? What kind of relationship could transform Rome's most disciplined emperor into a man consumed by grief? And why did the mysterious death of a Greek youth threaten to shake the very foundations of the empire? The answers lie buried in marble fragments, hidden inscriptions, and the testimonies of ancient historians who dared to record what others preferred to forget. Because this is the story of a love so powerful, it challenged the gods, and so dangerous, it nearly destroyed the man who ruled the world. Publius alias Hadrianus was not born to rule the world. Born on January 24th, 76 AD, in the Spanish city of Italica, he entered a world where power was earned through blood, brilliance, and brutal ambition. His father, Publius alias Hadrianus Afer, died when the boy was only 10 years old, leaving him under the guardianship of his cousin, the future Emperor Trajan. This twist of fate would change the course of Roman history forever. From childhood, those who knew him noticed something different about Hadrian. Ancient sources describe a young man of extraordinary intellect and unsettling intensity. He devoured Greek literature, studied philosophy with obsessive dedication, and displayed an almost supernatural gift for architecture and engineering. According to the historian Spartianus, even as a teenager, Hadrian possessed an uncanny ability to remember every person he met and every detail of conversations from years past. But behind this brilliant facade lay something more complex. Historical records suggest that Hadrian struggled with the traditional expectations of Roman masculinity from an early age. While other young patricians focused on military glory and political advancement, he was drawn to art, poetry, and what some sources hint were relationships that defied conventional Roman norms. His biographers noted his deep fascination with Greek culture, particularly the Greek acceptance of male relationships that Rome officially frowned upon. Trajan, recognizing both his ward's talents and his need for discipline, thrust Hadrian into military service. The young man served with distinction in Dacia and along the Danube frontier, proving himself as both a soldier and a commander. Yet fellow officers remarked on his strange habits. According to military records, he would disappear for hours to sketch architectural plans or compose poetry, behavior that marked him as different in the hyper-masculine world of the Roman legions. In 100 AD, Trajan arranged what he hoped would be a stabilizing marriage. Hadrian was wed to Vibia Sabina, the emperor's great niece, in a union designed to secure the succession and bind powerful families together. Historical sources paint a picture of a marriage that was politically successful, but personally cold. Sabina herself reportedly complained to friends that Hadrian was a distant and peculiar husband, more interested in his books and building projects than in producing heirs. The couple never had children, a fact that ancient gossips attributed to various causes. Some whispered that Hadrian's interests lay elsewhere entirely. Others suggested that the emperor's intellectual pursuits left little room for domestic life. What historians do know is that this childless marriage would later play a crucial role in the dynasty's fate and in Hadrian's desperate search for meaning and connection. As Trajan's health declined, the question of succession loomed over the empire. According to multiple sources, including Cassius Dio, Trajan adopted Hadrian on his deathbed in 117 AD, though some historians dispute whether this adoption actually occurred or was fabricated afterward. What remains certain is that Hadrian ascended to the purple at age 41, inheriting an empire at its territorial peak, but facing unprecedented challenges from rebellions, economic strain, and internal political tensions. But the new emperor carried with him a secret that would soon transform from private struggle to public scandal, because somewhere in the vast territories he now ruled, a beautiful young Greek was about to enter his life and change everything. The exact moment when Emperor Hadrian first laid eyes on Antinous remains one of history's most debated mysteries. What historians do know is that sometime around 123 AD, during the emperor's extensive travels through the eastern provinces, a young Greek from the region of Bithynia entered the imperial court and changed the trajectory of the Roman Empire forever. Antinous was born around 110 AD in Claudiopolis, a small city in what is now modern-day Turkey. Ancient sources describe him as possessing extraordinary beauty, the kind that inspired sculptors and stopped conversations in marble halls. According to the limited historical records, he was likely selected for the imperial court through the traditional Roman practice of choosing promising young men from the provinces to serve as pages or companions to high-ranking officials. The Roman system of mentorship between older men and younger protégés was deeply embedded in the culture, borrowed from Greek traditions, but adapted to Roman sensibilities. These relationships, called patronage, were supposed to be about education, advancement, and the transfer of knowledge from experienced leaders to the next generation. But historians suggest that what developed between the 47-year-old emperor and the teenage Greek transcended these conventional boundaries entirely. Contemporary sources paint a picture of immediate fascination. The historian Spartianus notes that Hadrian, known for his restless intellect and constant travel, suddenly began spending unprecedented amounts of time with his new companion. Court observers reported that the emperor, who had previously maintained a disciplined schedule of administration and study, became visibly distracted when Antinous was present. What made this relationship particularly scandalous was not its existence, but its intensity. Roman society tolerated certain forms of same-sex relationships, particularly those following the Greek model, where an older mentor guided a younger student. However, these arrangements were expected to be temporary, educational, and conducted with appropriate discretion. According to multiple historical accounts, Hadrian's devotion to Antinous quickly exceeded these social boundaries. Ancient writers recorded whispers from the imperial household. Servants reported that the emperor would cancel important meetings to spend time with the young Greek. Military commanders noted that Antinous began accompanying Hadrian on official journeys, a privilege usually reserved for family members or high-ranking officials. Most shocking of all, according to court chronicles, Hadrian began commissioning portraits and sculptures of Antinous, displaying them prominently in public spaces across the empire. The relationship also highlighted the complex dynamics of power in Roman society. Antinous, despite his beauty and the emperor's obvious favor, remained legally a subject and likely a slave or freedman. This imbalance would have made any relationship between them inherently problematic by modern standards, though ancient Roman attitudes towards such arrangements were markedly different. Historical evidence suggests that Empress Sabina tolerated this development with the resigned pragmatism typical of imperial wives. Her own relationship with Hadrian had long been described by court observers as formal and distant. Some sources hint that she may have even welcomed the distraction that kept her husband's attention elsewhere. But as the months passed and Hadrian's fascination with Antinous only deepened, what had begun as court gossip transformed into something far more dangerous. Because in an empire built on tradition, hierarchy, and the careful balance of power, the emperor's growing obsession with a beautiful Greek youth was about to challenge everything Rome thought it knew about leadership, dignity, and control. What began as whispered speculation in the corridors of the imperial palace soon became the most talked-about relationship in the Roman world. By 125 AD, according to multiple historical sources, Emperor Hadrian's devotion to Antinous had evolved into something that shocked even a society accustomed to the sexual freedoms of its elite. This was no longer a typical mentor-student arrangement or a discreet imperial dalliance. Ancient chroniclers describe it as a consuming passion that threatened to overshadow the business of governing the world's greatest empire. Contemporary accounts paint a picture of an emperor transformed. Cassius Dio records that Hadrian, previously known for his methodical approach to administration, became unpredictable in his scheduling and priorities. Senate meetings were postponed so the emperor could spend time with his young companion. Military campaigns were planned around Antinous' presence. Most remarkably, according to archaeological evidence, Hadrian began incorporating the Greek youth into official imperial imagery, an honor typically reserved for family members or gods. The relationship violated numerous unwritten rules of Roman society. While same-sex relationships were tolerated within certain parameters, they were expected to follow strict hierarchies and time limits. According to historical sources, Hadrian showed no interest in following these social scripts. Instead, as Antinous aged from teenager into young adulthood, the emperor's attachment only deepened. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story shocks you the most so far? And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. Court observers noted changes in imperial protocol that had never been seen before. Ancient sources describe how Antinous was granted unprecedented access to private imperial meetings. He traveled with Hadrian's personal entourage rather than with the servants or lower-ranking officials. Most scandalously, according to surviving inscriptions and artistic evidence, the emperor began commissioning public monuments featuring Antinous alongside traditional Roman religious imagery. The archaeological record reveals the extent of this devotion. Historians have catalogued hundreds of sculptures, coins, and inscriptions from across the empire featuring Antinous' likeness. These weren't hidden in private chambers but displayed prominently in temples and public buildings from Britain to Egypt. According to art historians, no other non-imperial figure in Roman history received such widespread artistic representation during their lifetime. Ancient writers recorded the empire's mixed reactions. Some sources suggest that certain provinces, particularly those with Greek cultural influences, viewed the relationship with relative acceptance. However, traditional Roman senators and military commanders reportedly grew increasingly uncomfortable with what they saw as their emperor's loss of dignitas, the gravitas expected of Roman leaders. But perhaps most dangerous of all, Historians suggest that Hadrian's obvious happiness with Antinous highlighted his long-standing alienation from traditional Roman expectations of marriage and family. His childless union with Empress Sabina had always been a source of whispered concern about the succession. Now, his very public devotion to a young man seemed to confirm the empire's worst fears about their leader's unconventional desires. Yet none of this prepared Rome for what would happen when the emperor's impossible love affair collided with the ancient mysteries of Egypt, where the line between life and death was thinner than anywhere else in the ancient world. By 128 AD, what had begun as imperial favoritism had transformed into something that ancient historians describe as unprecedented in the annals of Roman leadership. Emperor Hadrian's devotion to Antinous had evolved beyond the boundaries of any relationship previously recorded between a Roman ruler and his companion. Contemporary sources paint a picture of an emperor whose judgment, once celebrated for its clarity and wisdom, had become clouded by an obsession that threatened the very foundations of imperial authority. The extent of Hadrian's fixation became evident in ways that shocked even the cosmopolitan Roman elite. According to multiple historical accounts, the emperor began consulting astrologers and mystics about Antinous' future, seeking prophecies and divine guidance about their relationship. Ancient sources describe how Hadrian commissioned horoscopes for the young Greek and arranged for mystery cult initiations typically reserved for the imperial family. This behavior represented a dramatic departure from the emperor's previously rational approach to supernatural matters. More troubling to contemporary observers were reports of Hadrian's increasingly erratic behavior when separated from his companion. Military commanders documented incidents where the emperor would abandon strategic planning sessions if Antinous was not present. According to court chronicles, state banquets were rescheduled around the young man's availability. Most concerning, some sources suggest that important political decisions began to be influenced by Antinous' presence or absence from imperial councils. The relationship had also begun generating dangerous political undercurrents throughout the empire. Ancient writers recorded whispers among provincial governors about the emperor's mental state. Foreign ambassadors reported back to their kingdoms about the strange dynamics they witnessed at the Roman court. According to diplomatic correspondence that has survived, some allied nations began questioning whether Hadrian remained the formidable leader who had consolidated Roman power across 3 continents. Archaeological evidence reveals the financial extent of the emperor's devotion. Historians have calculated that resources devoted to sculptures, monuments, and artistic representations of Antinous during this period rivaled expenditures typically reserved for major military campaigns. Coins bearing Antinous' image were minted across the empire, an honor previously accorded only to emperors and their immediate heirs. Perhaps most dangerously, the emperor's obsession had begun attracting attention from religious authorities and conservative senators who viewed the relationship as a threat to traditional Roman values. Ancient sources describe growing criticism from priests who argued that the gods were being offended by the emperor's unconventional devotion. Some historians suggest that by 130 AD, a quiet but organized opposition to Hadrian's rule was beginning to coalesce around concerns about his relationship with Antinous. The young Greek himself, according to limited historical sources, appears to have been increasingly uncomfortable with the attention placed upon him. Contemporary accounts hint that Antinous, now in his early 20s, may have begun to understand the impossible position he occupied in the empire's power structure. Some sources suggest he attempted to convince Hadrian to be more discreet, fearing the political consequences of their continued public association. But the emperor seemed incapable of moderation when it came to his beloved companion. As the imperial court prepared for a grand tour of the eastern provinces in 130 AD, including a journey to the mystical land of Egypt, few could have predicted that this dangerous obsession was about to collide with ancient forces that would transform personal tragedy into imperial scandal. In 130 AD, Emperor Hadrian embarked on what would become the most documented and controversial imperial tour in Roman history. Unlike previous journeys where the emperor traveled with traditional military escorts and administrative staff, This expedition included Antinous as part of the official imperial entourage. Contemporary sources describe a journey that blurred the lines between state business and personal pilgrimage, as Hadrian seemed determined to share the wonders of his empire with the young man who had captured his heart. The tour began in Asia Minor, where ancient writers recorded scenes that had never been witnessed before in imperial protocol. According to multiple historical accounts, Hadrian insisted that Antinous participate in official ceremonies typically reserved for family members or high-ranking officials. At the ancient city of Troy, the emperor reportedly conducted private rituals honoring Achilles and Patroclus, the legendary Greek warriors, whose relationship ancient sources often compared to his own bond with Antinous. As the imperial party moved through Greece, historians note that Hadrian's behavior became increasingly theatrical and emotional. At the Eleusinian Mysteries, the emperor arranged for both himself and Antinous to be initiated into the sacred rites, an honor that required special dispensations from the religious authorities. Contemporary accounts suggest that witnesses were shocked by the intensity of Hadrian's devotion during these ceremonies, as he seemed more focused on sharing the experience with his companion than on the religious significance itself. The journey took on an almost mystical quality as it progressed eastward. Ancient sources describe how Hadrian began commissioning statues and monuments of Antinous at every major stop, creating a trail of artistic tributes across the Mediterranean world. At Delphi, the emperor reportedly consulted the oracle about his relationship, though the exact nature of the prophecies he received remains lost to history. What is documented is that he left substantial donations to ensure that prayers would be offered for Antinous' well-being. By the time the imperial entourage reached Alexandria in late 130 AD, court observers noted that the emperor's obsession had reached unprecedented levels. Egyptian sources describe lavish banquets where Hadrian toasted Antinous with a fervor that made even the cosmopolitan Alexandrians uncomfortable. The emperor, who had previously been praised for his diplomatic restraint, now seemed incapable of concealing his emotions when his beloved companion was present. The final phase of the journey would take them up the Nile River into the heart of ancient Egypt, a land that Romans viewed with a mixture of fascination and superstition. Ancient writers recorded that Hadrian was particularly excited about showing Antinous the mysteries of Egyptian religion and culture. The emperor had long been fascinated by Egyptian magic and mysticism, and he seemed to believe that the ancient land held secrets that could somehow protect or preserve what he treasured most. Local Egyptian priests, according to surviving papyrus records, were puzzled by the emperor's requests for special blessings and protective rituals for his young companion. Some sources suggest that Hadrian may have been consulting Egyptian mystics about ways to ensure Antinous' safety and longevity, displaying a level of superstition that was entirely out of character for the usually rational emperor. As their boat sailed south toward the ancient temples and tombs that lined the Nile, few in the imperial party could have suspected that this journey of love and discovery was about to become a voyage into the darkest tragedy. Because in the mysterious waters of Egypt's sacred river, where pharaohs had once sought immortality and priests had performed rituals older than Rome itself, the emperor's greatest fear was about to become a devastating reality that would haunt him for the rest of his days. On October 30th, 130 AD, the course of Roman history changed forever in the waters of the sacred Nile River. What happened on that fateful day remains one of antiquity's most debated mysteries. But the undisputed fact is that Antinous, the young Greek who had captured the heart of the world's most powerful man, drowned in Egypt's ancient waters. The official account spoke of a tragic accident, but within hours, whispers of something far more sinister began spreading through the imperial entourage. According to the limited contemporary sources that survive, the imperial party had been sailing near the ancient city of Hermopolis when disaster struck. The exact circumstances remain frustratingly unclear, as the official Roman records are unusually sparse for such a significant event. What historians do know is that Antinous was found dead in the river, and that Emperor Hadrian's reaction was so extreme that it shocked even those closest to him. Ancient sources describe Hadrian as inconsolable, refusing to eat or sleep, while demanding that every possible effort be made to recover Antinous' body. When the young man's remains were finally found, contemporary accounts suggest that the emperor's grief bordered on madness, with witnesses reporting that he wept openly and spoke to the corpse as if it were still alive. But it was the circumstances surrounding the death that generated the most disturbing speculation. Several ancient historians, including Cassius Dio, hint at darker possibilities than simple drowning. Some sources suggest that Antinous may have taken his own life, possibly driven to desperation by the impossible pressures of his position or by some unknown crisis in his relationship with the emperor. Other accounts, though less reliable, whisper of ritual sacrifice or even foul play by those who opposed Hadrian's controversial obsession. The timing of the death added another layer of mystery to the tragedy. October 30th corresponded to ancient Egyptian festivals honoring Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. Some historians suggest that this timing was not coincidental, pointing to evidence that Hadrian had been deeply involved in Egyptian mystical practices during their journey. Contemporary sources indicate that the emperor had been consulting priests and magicians about immortality and divine transformation. Perhaps most disturbing were the rumors that began circulating among the Egyptian priests and local population. According to surviving papyrus documents, some believed that Antinous had been sacrificed in a ritual designed to transfer his youth and beauty to the aging emperor. While these accounts are likely products of superstition and gossip, they reveal the atmosphere of mystery and fear that surrounded the incident. The immediate aftermath was equally troubling. Instead of conducting a traditional Roman funeral and returning to the capital, Hadrian ordered that Antinous' body be mummified according to Egyptian custom, a practice that was almost unheard of for Romans. Contemporary sources describe the emperor personally overseeing the embalming process, displaying an obsession with preserving his beloved's physical form that unsettled even the experienced Egyptian embalmers. Most shocking of all was Hadrian's decision to remain in Egypt for several additional weeks, despite urgent messages from Rome requiring his attention. Ancient accounts describe an emperor who seemed unable to accept the reality of his loss, spending hours beside Antinous' preserved body and consulting every mystic and priest he could find about possible means of communication with the dead. What emerged from this period of grief and desperation would scandalize the Roman world and create a religious controversy that would persist for centuries. Because the emperor who had lost everything he loved was about to do something that no Roman ruler had ever dared attempt. In the weeks following Antinous' death, Emperor Hadrian displayed a level of grief that ancient historians describe as unprecedented in the annals of imperial history. What emerged from his devastation would challenge every convention of Roman religion, politics, and social order. The emperor, who had once been praised for his rational leadership, now embarked on a course of action so radical that it would scandalize the empire and create religious controversies that lasted for centuries. The first shocking decision came within days of the tragedy. According to multiple ancient sources, including the historian Cassius Dio, Hadrian declared that Antinous would be honored as a god. This was not merely an honorary title or poetic metaphor, but an official divine proclamation that carried the full weight of imperial authority. No Roman emperor had ever deified a private individual, let alone someone of such humble origins. The declaration sent shockwaves throughout the empire's religious and political establishments. Contemporary accounts describe the immediate aftermath as a frenzy of imperial commands that bordered on the manic. Hadrian ordered the immediate construction of temples dedicated to Antinous across the empire. Ancient sources record that within months, shrines and altars were being erected from Britain to Syria. The emperor personally designed many of these sacred spaces, displaying an obsessive attention to detail that reflected his consuming need to memorialize his lost beloved. Perhaps most dramatically, Hadrian founded an entire city in Antinous' honor. Located near the site of the drowning, Antinopolis was established as a major urban center with full Roman colonial privileges. According to surviving administrative records, the emperor diverted enormous resources to this project, importing craftsmen and artists from across the Mediterranean to create a monument to his grief. The religious implications of Hadrian's actions horrified traditional Romans. Ancient sources describe senators and priests expressing private outrage at what they viewed as a corruption of sacred traditions. According to historical accounts, the emperor had essentially created a new deity based on personal loss rather than religious tradition or civic virtue. Some contemporary writers suggest that Hadrian's grief had driven him to challenge the very foundations of Roman religious order. Archaeological evidence reveals the staggering scale of the emperor's devotion. Modern historians have catalogued over 2,000 surviving sculptures, reliefs, and artistic representations of Antinous created during Hadrian's reign, making him the most frequently depicted figure in Roman art after the emperor himself. These weren't hidden away in private spaces, but displayed prominently in public forums, temples, and government buildings across the empire. The establishment of mystery cults dedicated to Antinous created additional controversy. According to ancient sources, Hadrian personally oversaw the development of religious rituals and ceremonies honoring his deified beloved. These rites, which borrowed elements from Egyptian, Greek, and Roman traditions, were unlike anything previously seen in imperial religion. Foreign kingdoms found themselves in an impossible diplomatic position. Ancient diplomatic records suggest that many rulers were unsure how to respond to Rome's new god. Some sources indicate that gifts and tributes began flowing to Antinous shrines as foreign dignitaries sought to avoid offending the grieving emperor. Most troubling was the growing realization that this was not a temporary phase of imperial grief, but a permanent transformation of the empire's religious landscape. Because as months turned to years, it became clear that Hadrian's radical actions had created something that would outlive even his own reign, forcing the Roman world to grapple with questions about love, power, and the price of absolute authority. The consequences of Hadrian's unprecedented actions reverberated throughout the Roman Empire, creating political and social tensions that would define the remainder of his reign. What had begun as personal grief had evolved into a crisis of imperial authority that challenged the very foundations of Roman leadership. Ancient sources document a growing chorus of criticism from senators, priests, and provincial governors who viewed the emperor's behavior as a dangerous abandonment of traditional Roman values. According to contemporary historical accounts, the Senate's reaction was one of barely concealed horror. While no senator dared to openly challenge the emperor's divine proclamations, private correspondence reveals deep concern about Hadrian's mental state and judgment. Ancient sources describe whispered conversations in the forum about whether an emperor who could deify a Greek youth based on personal affection could be trusted with decisions affecting the empire's future. The financial cost of Hadrian's obsession created additional strain on imperial resources. According to administrative records that have survived, the construction of Antinous temples, the founding of Antinopolis, and the creation of thousands of artistic monuments required enormous expenditures that diverted funds from traditional military and infrastructure projects. Some historians suggest that these expenses may have contributed to economic pressures that would plague the empire in later decades. Religious authorities across the empire found themselves in an impossible position. Ancient sources describe priests and augurs struggling to incorporate worship of Antinous into established Roman religious practices. Traditional Roman religion emphasized civic virtue, military valor, and family honor, making the deification of a young Greek man based on romantic love deeply problematic for conservative religious leaders. The international implications were equally troubling. Foreign kingdoms and allied states, according to diplomatic records, were uncertain how to respond to Rome's new religious requirements. Some sources suggest that certain rulers privately mocked the emperor's actions, viewing them as evidence of Roman decadence and weakness. Others worried that failure to honor Antinous might offend Hadrian and jeopardize their relationships with Rome. Perhaps most damaging was the impact on Hadrian's own effectiveness as a leader. Ancient historians document a marked change in the emperor's priorities and decision-making processes following Antinous' death. Military campaigns were postponed or abandoned so the emperor could oversee temple construction. According to some sources, the emperor's preoccupation with his deified beloved began interfering with the day-to-day governance of the world's largest empire. The scandal also highlighted uncomfortable questions about imperial succession. Hadrian's childless marriage to Sabina had already created uncertainty about the dynasty's future, but his public devotion to Antinous seemed to confirm senators' worst fears about the emperor's priorities. Ancient sources describe growing anxiety about what would happen when Hadrian died, particularly given his apparent disinterest in traditional family relationships. The emperor himself, according to those who observed him closely, seemed increasingly isolated and withdrawn. Ancient sources describe a ruler who had once been celebrated for his energy becoming moody and unpredictable. Court observers noted that Hadrian spent increasing amounts of time in private meditation, often ignoring important state business to commune with statues of his beloved Antinous. Most tragically, some sources suggest that Hadrian's radical actions failed to provide him with the comfort he desperately sought. Ancient accounts describe an emperor who remained haunted by grief despite all his efforts to honor Antinous' memory. As his reign entered its final phase, it became clear that his love had transformed not only his own life, but the entire trajectory of the Roman Empire. Emperor Hadrian died on July 10th, 138 AD, 8 years after the tragedy that had defined the final chapter of his reign. According to ancient sources, his last words reportedly included references to Antinous, suggesting that even in death, the emperor remained haunted by the love that had both elevated and destroyed him. What followed was a systematic attempt by his successors and later Christian emperors to erase the scandal that had shaken the foundations of the Roman world. Within decades of Hadrian's death, the worship of Antinous began to face official suppression. Emperor Marcus Aurelius quietly discontinued funding for Antinous temples and allowed many of the mystery cults to fade into obscurity. According to historical records, what had once been a vibrant religious movement supported by imperial resources gradually withered as political priorities shifted and new rulers sought to distance themselves from their predecessors' controversial legacy. The rise of Christianity brought even more systematic persecution of Antinous worship. Early Christian writers, according to surviving theological texts, viewed the deification of Antinous as particularly offensive because it challenged both traditional Roman values and emerging Christian doctrine. Saints and church fathers wrote scathing denunciations of what they described as a pagan cult based on sexual deviance and imperial madness. Yet despite centuries of suppression, the archaeological evidence reveals the true scope of what Hadrian had created. Modern historians have uncovered Antinous monuments across 3 continents, from Hadrian's Wall in Britain to temples in Egypt and Syria. Some scholars estimate that more artistic representations of Antinous survive than of most Roman emperors, testament to the intensity of Hadrian's devotion and the empire-wide scale of his commemorative campaign. The story was largely forgotten by mainstream history for over a millennium. Medieval chroniclers dismissed it as a footnote to Hadrian's architectural achievements. Renaissance scholars often censored passages dealing with the emperor's same-sex relationship, ensuring that the scandal remained buried beneath layers of scholarly discretion. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that historians began piecing together the true story from fragmentary sources. Archaeological discoveries gradually revealed the extent of Hadrian's obsession. Modern scholars, working with newly discovered papyri and previously ignored historical sources, have reconstructed a narrative that earlier generations had deliberately obscured. Today, historians recognize the story of Hadrian and Antinous as one of the most remarkable love affairs in ancient history. Not because it was unique in its nature, but because of its unprecedented public scale and political consequences. According to contemporary scholarship, the relationship provides crucial insights into Roman attitudes towards sexuality, power, and the limits of imperial authority. Perhaps most importantly, the story reveals the human cost of living authentically in societies that demand conformity. Both Hadrian and Antinous paid terrible prices for a love that defied convention. The emperor sacrificed his political effectiveness and historical reputation, while Antinous lost his life under circumstances that remain mysterious to this day. Their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about love and power that remain relevant today. What is the price of living truthfully in a world that demands deception? What legacy do we leave when we choose love over convention? If you've been moved by this tragic tale of forbidden love and its devastating consequences, subscribe for more hidden stories that reveal the complex humanity behind history's most powerful figures. The emperor who ruled the world could not save the one person who mattered most to him. That truth, carved in marble across an ancient empire, reminds us that some forms of love are so powerful they survive even systematic efforts to erase them from history.